Let's see if you can follow my logic with this, okay? Yes, the title sounds like I lost some IQ along the way making this video, but let's just follow the reasoning for a second. What has been going on in Dragonflight, much like it happened in Shadowlands, is that after a couple of months of the season, players start losing interest. They start, raid logging, they start ditching, just logging in every day. They don't see much of a reason, much of a pull, much of an interest in being online every day. Much like myself, recently I've been playing other games for weeks now because there isn't really much of an interest for me in the season right now. So the question of today is, how can this be improved in the War Within, but even how it could be improved right now? Why, if a season lasts 6 months, why is it okay to sort of get bored of a season in the first couple of months? Why can't we have something that keeps you more engaged for the full duration of the season? And this dates all the way back to Legion, because Legion was the new experimental season. Let's say it was the beginning of modern WoW, where Blizzard added many features in-game, even in the open world, which could grant your character power. This is the essence of an RPG. You want to get stuff on your character that makes it stronger. You want to feel improving in power week by week, or day by day, or month by month. You just want to feel getting stronger, right? It's one of the cornerstones of any RPG character-focused game. That's why, for example, at the start of Dragonflight, you had hundreds, you had thousands, you had hundreds of thousands of players running from rare to rare, from rare to rare in the first couple of weeks of the expansion, because those rares could give you high item level loot. Yes, those were things that were going to become completely obsolete the moment the raid and Mythic Plus opened. They were going to be completely outscaled by actual good loot, but because that was the only thing available for the first couple of resets in the game to make your character stronger, that's what players went to. Players bored themselves to death, getting to Renown 20 with the Maruk Centaurs, just running hunt after hunt after hunt, just so they could get to Renown 20 and get the crafted piece, get the free epic chest piece for them. They went and did a couple of different rep grinds just to be able to get some high item level gear, and all that stuff was just going to last a few days, because as soon as Mythic Plus and the raid were open, these things were going to become obsolete. Yet players still flocked to that type of content because it still gave them power. It gave them increases in just strength. And that's what Legion was full of. In Legion you had artifact power from basically every activity, so you could just get artifact power to make your weapon stronger, to unlock more traits. You also had the Legion legendaries, meaning every activity increased the chance of you to loot. So you had this constant possible chase of a possible best in slot legendary. You also had things like relics to put on your gear that you could hunt from dungeons, raids, even world quests. And finally, you had Titan Forging, meaning that even the tiniest, shittiest blue item from a world quest could Titan Forge into being stronger than a mythic raid boss loot. All of these things combined made it so that you always had, technically, something for you available to grind, even in the open world. Even without having a group of friends, 4 other people or 19 other people to play with, you could just go out in the open world by yourself, grind some rares, grind some world quests, maybe do the Wither training scenario, and all of these things could have, in some way, increased the power of your character. Either by getting AP, by getting a relic, by Titan Forging a piece of gear, or by getting a legendary. This was slightly curbed down in BFA. The now renamed Azerite power was much weaker than the artifact power. It was not nearly as impactful. Eventually we got rid of Titan Forging. There were no more relics to go after, and the Legion legendaries were gone. And this was then completely removed in Shadowlands. In Shadowlands we had no more AP. The now renamed, again, Anima power was completely cosmetic. You had no more Legion legendaries. Now the legendaries of Shadowlands were basically completely deterministic. You could just pick and choose the legendary you wanted. No more Titan Forging, no more relics on your gear, etc, etc. And that was also the starting point of players realizing that the game, the outside of the game was dead. There was nothing to do in the open world. They realized, a couple of weeks, a month, a couple of months into a season, what am I doing in these zones? If I'm not doing world quests for AP because I don't get power from AP, if I'm not doing world quests because I don't get the chance of looting a legendary, if I don't do world quests because they offer me a relic or a piece of gear that could Titan Forge and become actually useful, then what am I doing world quests for? And that's where players realized there was nothing to do in the game other than being funneled in the seasonal new zone, right? The Mo, and then Cortia, and then Zereth Mortis, and then the reward in there was minuscule, right? If you remember, the only reward available from those zones, if you get the max rep at the end of the grind, was a socket. Like 1 socket on your gear per week was the reward you would get from those zones, which is a very minor reward. And even that was removed in Dragonflight. Blizzard moved basically the weekly socket reward from those reputations to the Great Vault. As a bad luck protection, if you don't get anything from the Great Vault, you can still get your socket. And that is the problem that we still have in this expansion, and we have continued to have since Shadowlands, and why we started the video with this title. Why were artifact power and Titan Forging a good thing for the game? Obviously, the mindless grind for AP, the completely RNG legendaries, and the completely RNG chance of getting best in slot gear from a world quest thanks to Titan Forging are terrible systems. They are not very healthy for the game, they're not very healthy for the player base because they don't have a deterministic reward. It's completely based on RNG. You never quite know if you're getting rewarded or not. You're essentially being blackmailed. You are being blackmailed by the game, telling you could be getting a 10% DPS increase or not. Or you might go a month farming AP in world quests and never actually get a legendary. So the systems by themselves were quite bad for the player base as a whole, which is why Blizzard started removing them, which is why, if you don't remember or were not playing back then, there were plenty of complaints. Plenty of players were just annoyed at these predatory systems, these forced grinds in the game. The major talk back then was, let us play what we want, let us, do the activities we want without having to spend hours farming for AP, or farming for legendaries, or farming for corruptions, or farming for benthic gear. All of these extra added, super powerful, borrowed powers that would sort of attract the players to do that content because they saw the power they could get behind those activities. And Blizzard did listen. Unfortunately, for once, they did listen to the complaints of the player base, and over time, into Shadowlands and now into Dragonflight, they basically removed all of these systems from the game. However, we now find ourselves with a different kind of problem. The different kind of problem is that now players get bored after a month or two into a season, because now the only things that give you power to your character have been locked behind, instanced weekly lockouts like the Raid, like Mythic Plus, and not much of anything you can do by yourself, solo. You have the 30-minute a week effort to get your crafted item, right? You get the 1500 rep you had to get with the Loam Niffen in 10.1. You now have the rep, the Super Bloom you have to do in 10.2 in the Emerald Dream, but that takes about half an hour once a week, which is not exactly a big time investment. So it's normal for players to sort of lose interest in the season. What's worse is that we have documented since Aberus, since last year, how quickly players can get to very high item level. We pointed out that just in 3 resets, in 3 weeks, in 3 Great Vaults of 10.1, players could already be at 444 item level, which was near the max item level of 10.1 before Blizzard added the myth track gear in the Raid and in the Great Vault. So if you have a season that lasts for 6 months and you can have players get to near max item level in 3 weeks, and then you have no more repeatable, grindable content in the open world that can keep you engaged because it gives you the feeling that over time you are making your character stronger, then it's easy for players to lose interest in the season. Unless you have some external party keeping you interested in the game, like for example you're trying to push Mythic Plus, so the type of rewards you can get from the game, the extra power for your character in the game doesn't matter nearly as much because you are already into the Mythic Plus activity. Besides that, there isn't really much else to keep you in the game. And that's today's question and today's hope for the next expansion as well, that Blizzard goes back giving you some kind of power in the game. Because many players often underestimate how more willing the player base is going to be in completing a certain activity if they know they are going to get some power out of it. Think about it. When's the last time you bothered doing a world quest, right? When's the last time? Now think about it this way. If you had in-game a system where completing 20 world quests every week would give you a socket on your character, how much more likely would you be to do world quests? Complete 20 world quests per week and you get a socket. How many more players do you think would spend time in-game just to get that socket? I don't think 100% of the player base would do it, probably not even 90% or 80 or 70%, but even if it was just 50%, even if it was just half the player base, that would still be a massive win in terms of the player retention and the player interest in the season. If every week you could log in and do 20 world quests just to get your socket to empower your character. What if Blizzard extended this? What if you made every piece of gear able to store up to 3 different sockets? What if you could make these, empowered gems? So not gems you get from jewel crafting, but the gems you get from getting the currency from the activities in the open world or even in Mythic Plus and in the raid, and then with those you buy the gems. Much like the quests right now, you pair the gems you bought from the vendors with a jewel crafter to get the finished version of the gem to put on your gear. And if you made these come from open worlds, from weekly events, maybe reuse activities that have been completely forgotten, like the Siege of Dragonbane Keep, the Tuskar Feast, the Maruk Hunts, the Centaur Hunts, actually make them useful again. What was the point of even developing these activities only for them to be forgotten in a week inside the expansion? If you brought them back and you made them able to progress towards reaching those sockets for your gear, players would be much more into them. And the sockets are just an example. It could be, items to increase the item level of your gear past what the normal upgrade tracks can upgrade the gear to. It could be extra enchants to pieces of gear that are not enchantable. It could be extra item slots. It could have been an extra system entirely, as long as it gave you some sort of character power. I feel like we have now gone long enough since Blizzard's scare of the player base complaining for the borrowed powers and the grinds in the game since Legion. We have now gone 2 full expansions, Shadowlands and Dragonflight, where Blizzard purged all of the power for your character from the open world. So I think that 4 years is long enough to respect the will of the complaining player base all the way back in BFA and Legion, and now decide that you as a developer know more than these clueless players, and it actually would be better for the player base to reintroduce some of these power-ups for your characters in the game, outside of the traditional means for you to gain power. So arenas, battlegrounds, PvP. Mythic Plus, and the Raid. Bring back the power in world quests, in dailies, in weeklies, in weekly events, even power in reputations. Basically, just significantly increase the stretch of time in which your character can be improved. Stop having a character reach near full level in the first 3 weeks of a season. My character killed Smolderon like 3 months ago and he was 484. It's been 3 months, I'm 487, and those only upgrades came once a week in the Great Vault. That's not a good system for an MMO who wants to have seasons lasting for 6 months. If you make your character that powerful that quickly and then you don't have the rest of the in-game world filled with ways to continue to upgrade the power of your character. That is today's point and today's complaint about the current situation in Dragonflight when it comes to the open world. I am fine playing Mythic Plus, I am fine raiding, I'm also not particularly happy in the idea of having to grind AP or to look for Legion legendaries 6 hours a day. That's not what we're asking here. Of course, the title was a bait on purpose. It's good in its idea. It was good in the idea of having power in the open world. The execution was bad. The execution was too predatory. The execution was preying on the addiction of the player base of looking for upgrades, looking for power, and giving them something very grindy, very RNG, not deterministic at all, that could give you wild swings in power, because you had legendaries giving you 15% more DPS, and then legendaries giving you 0% DPS. So not having power to choose over those after you grinded for 6 hours a day for a month to get one of them was obviously horrible. But the basic idea was good. The idea behind putting the power in the open world in normal activities to still give you a way to empower your character outside of organized events, team events like raids and dungeons, for example, was still a good idea and should still come back in the game. That on this Sunday is today's point. We need to stretch the time it takes for players to reach full power, and then we need to gate some of that full power behind open world, repeatable, even solvable activities to keep players more busy in the game for longer. That was today's point about the state of mostly the open world activities right now in Dragonflight. So let me guys know, of course, your takes about this when it comes to what you do in the game. Maybe many of you are perfectly fine raid logging, are perfectly fine hopping in once a week, doing your weekly chores in an hour and then logging out. So you could be in that camp as well, but this is my take on how we should revitalize the open world content with more meaningful rewards for the players, to give them more reasons to actually still play the game 2, 3 or 4 months into a season. So with this done, I'm going to leave you to the rest of your weekend on this Sunday. Thanks, of course, as usual, to all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution and the help to the growth of the channel, which, as usual, can be given also completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these pointless things out of the way, thank you, guys, for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, it's sunny today. I'm not partial to the sun in winter. I'm more of a cloud guy, perhaps even a rain guy, than a sun guy when it's cold.